First of all, Doug and I have been friends for many, many years, and he is without question one of the best speakers on what the trends are in the industry. And he happens to be part of a leading IQVIA, which is, as we all know, a leading company in this area. But I always love talking to him and getting his insights, in part because he doesn't have opinions that are just my gut feel. I think, Doug, you do occasionally believe in gut feel when you go to an Italian restaurant, but not when it comes to giving advice or telling people what's happening in the marketplace. But before we start, he was almost always present, but he caught a bug, and then also the idea of getting on a plane and maybe ending up somewhere in Omaha wasn't very pleasant for him. So he's virtual. But when he emailed me and said, I think I've come down with a flu, I said to him, I don't know what drug you should use, but maybe a lot of brandy would help. And his response was, which brandy would you recommend? And I said, any brandy is fine. It's just a question of what volume you consume. So, Doug, did you follow my medical recommendation?
I went to bourbon, to tell you the truth.
So with that, let me turn it over to Doug. He's going to talk about the pharmaceutical market trends, issues, and outlook.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. I did come down with the flu. I did get the flu shot, so it hasn't been exactly pleasant. So if I could see the presentation somewhere.
Yeah, it's coming up now.
Okay. Here we are, November 12th. The government is back in action, and we only have a month and a half till the end of the year, and now we're into 2026. I do have, as always, I do have a lot to cover. So let's go to the next slide. And these are some of the challenges the industry is facing today. And I think some of these were covered earlier. You have store closings. That's in the retail sector, rural hospitals, PBM reform, where that'll happen. Tariffs, kind of the new thing is changing distribution models and direct to consumer. Fred mentioned about that. The Inflation Reduction Act, the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, drug shortages, biosimilars. The last couple of years, we've had biosimilars on Humira and Stelara, first pharmacy benefit biosimilars, and profitability challenges. So it's probably more going on in this industry than I've ever seen it in my 40 plus years of looking at this market. Next slide. We're going to look at first, what are the trends in utilization? Next slide. Every year we do a use of medicines report in the United States. It comes out in April or May. And we pick out 6 things which we thought were the notable trends for 2024. And that was the growing use of immunology treatments. It used to be one size fits all. Now you see treatments for Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis increased 30% and 15% of the growth respectively. A lot of discussion on GLP-1s. You have a rising increase of GLP-1 prescriptions, and with a lot of potential because the market is not saturated yet. This is probably the biggest thing that I've seen in my career in the marketplace is GLP-1s. The rising use of last choice antibiotics. We're now taking the WHO reserve group has grown 42% since 2019. Of course, COVID's come on the scene. Next slide. Combating the opioid overdose epidemic. This peaked in 2011, and usage is down 69% since 2011, and returning to levels last seen in 1999. And we've seen the opioid overdose deaths declining, but synthetic fentanyl has taken up the slack on that. But the good news is that now there's new activity in trying to develop the non-opioid pain relievers. Growing use of novel oncology medicines. There's a lot of targeted treatments today. A lot of oncology is now a chronic disease rather than a death sentence. And orals are coming into the marketplace, so they account for more one third of the use. And then falling levels of vaccination. We do have this vaccine hesitancy in the United States, and that may have been because of the feeling that COVID vaccines were jammed down our throat. But we've seen flu vaccines declining, COVID vaccines declining. We see polio back, measles back, and so forth. So I have a big concern about that. Let's move to the next slide. These are the therapies that grew the most on days of therapy in 2024. And you see that hypertension, lipid regulators, mental health are the big three. But if you look at some of the big ones, ADHD, and obesity, infectious disease, and others, that's where the growth is, where we're seeing in volume, not in value. Next slide. If you look at the growth in 2024 and 2025 is similar, is that is traditional grew by 16 billion, especially grew by 27, especially led by oncology, immunology, and a little bit of HIV. Traditional led by obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular, a little bit down in respiratory, and other traditional up. Just a couple notes on that is that the traditional or the specialty meds for immunology are slowed down by the biosimilars that have come on the marketplace for Humira and still are in the last couple of years. And that's going to similarly hit the oncology market in 2028 on some of the biggest PD-1s that will lose patent protection. Next slide. And so this was covered a little bit, is that here we're looking at the net sales growth. And where is the growth coming from? It's coming from products that grew more than $500 million in the 2024. And there was actually 50 of those. There was 2014 grew between 250 million and 500 million. And you see loss of exclusivity, but so it's a lot of new products leading the way, and they tend to be more expensive. Next slide. When you look at days of therapy, just as on the volume side, is that there's 215 billion days of therapy. And what's kind of happening is that the retail growth is slowing, and the non-retail growth is growing. And if you just follow on the right-hand side, you can see that non-retail bore the brunt of COVID. That was in hospitals and long-term care facilities. They've come back, and now they're exceeding retail growth, particularly in long-term care, or I'm sorry, in home health care, and also in clinics. Next slide. All right, now let's move to current market performance. Next slide. So this is, again, on a list price basis, double digits. So the market is growing double digits and has been for the last 4 years. And at 13.9, that's a little bit higher than we had the last couple of years. So the market is still strong on a sales basis. And that's despite the fact that about $12 billion worth of value have been taken out of insulins because of the $35 price point now with the IRA Act. Next slide. This breaks out retail, mail, and non-retail. And you can see that the growth is the strongest in the non-retail. That's growing at 17.4%. Probably has a lot to do with the characteristics of some of the new innovation in the marketplace. Mail is around 10% and retail about 12.1%. Within retail, which we'll cover a little bit later, what's strongest in retail is in mass merchandisers and food stores. What's the weakest is independents, and you've seen a number of store closings in the big retail chain space, right, going out of business. Walgreens sold to private equity, and both Walgreens and CVS, closing, 300 stores per year. Next slide. So let's look at the six largest categories: immunology, anti-diabetics, oncology, antithrombotics, anti-obesity preps, and HIV. And so you see that the biggest in immunology now is Skyrizi and Dupixent, and Humira has lost its throne. In diabetes, it's Mounjaro, Ozempic, and Jardiance. And if you look at Mounjaro growing at 75%, If you look below that on Zepbound growing at 298%. So Lilly is kind of leading the way in that, and it might be why Novo Nordisk just replaced their senior management because of that, and was in contention to buy that organization Pfizer ultimately bid $10 billion for. In oncology, it's Keytruda, Darzalex, Faspro, Kisqali. All those are growing. Keytruda probably will have biosimilar competition in 2028. And thrombotics, Eliquis, Brilinta, anti-obesity preps, you see, the big two there. Saxenda is not doing well, and then HIV, Biktarvy, Descovy, and Dovato. And there's more movement toward once a day pills instead of combinations. Next slide. So when you say this market is dominated by GLP-1s, is that three of the top five fastest growing products are GLP-1s, and that's Mounjaro, Zepbound, Wegovy. The other two are Skyrizi and Dupixent. Then you see Ozempic number 6, Jardiance number 7, Eliquis, Rinvoq, and Brasilex is the last one. So 5 out of the top 10 are GLP-1s, and that's number 1 and number 2, both by Lilly products. Number 4, number 6 by Novo Nordisk. Next slide. When you look at the retail market, I use this example, what's growing in this market is volume. Volume is growing more than anything else. New products is the second thing that leads this market, followed by line extension and others. And you see that price is down. So price used to be a factor in a lot of these markets, and price is not a factor in retail and less a factor than in some of the other places than it has been in the past. Next slide. So when you look at the market growth, this 39% of the market growth is coming from retail, and most of the retail growth is coming from GLP-1s. So here you have about 82.3% of the growth is coming from GLP-1s, 18% of non-GLP-1s. The GLP-1s are traditional, so traditional is outgrowing specialty, and brands, that's where the dollar growth is in the marketplace. So GLP-1s are really having a big role in this marketplace. We'll cover that in a little bit more detail later. Next slide. So what's the top product in male? That's now Skyrizi, Dupixent, Humira, Stelara, and Enbrel. So number 3 and number 4 of losing volume because of biosimilars. Number 1 is the Ozempic, Mounjaro, Eliquis, Jardiance, and Wegovy in retail, and non-retail, of course, it's the cancer products with Keytruda and Darzalex Faspro and Opdivo 1, 2, 3. Next slide. And so if you look at these segments again, retail, mail, and non-retail, is that the ones at the top are the ones that are growing. That's Ozempic, Mounjaro, Eliquis, Jardiance, and Skyrizi. The ones that are losing volume our value is Trulicity, Januvia, Arexvy, Vyvanse, and Lantus Solistar. In male, it's Opdivo, Darzalex Faspro, Dexcom, Januvia, and Trogarzo, and what's losing Humira, Stelara because of the biosimilars, Sprycel, Cosentyx, Trulicity. And then non-retail, it's dominated by number 1 and number 2 are oncology, number 3 immunology, number 4 and 5 are diabetes or diabetes and anti-obesity preps. And you see what's losing is Fluzone, Viclory, Humira, and Neulasta, probably because of the biosimilars. Next slide. So what's important to know about the specialty, especially, is about 52% of the market, and traditional is 48. And it would probably be, if the GLP-1s were not traditional products, it would probably be 60-40 now, but it's 52-48. And the growth rate is fairly similar, and traditional growing, outpacing, has been outpaced a little bit by traditional growth, but traditional growth or by specialty growth, but traditional growth is still doing pretty well. Next slide. Um, and we'll skip this one. You're going to get a copy of this anyways. And these are the top 8 specialty products. You see now it's Skyrizi, Dupixent, Keytruda, Humira, Biktarvy, Stelara, Enbrel, and Rinvoq. And if you add up Skyrizi, 22 billion, you add in another 18 billion for Humira, that's 40 billion in Skyrizi, and what's the other? Rinvoq, 9 billion. You almost have $50 billion worth of sales. And Humira on its own back in the day was 23 billion. So that is more than doubled in size as that immunology franchise is expanding. And it's one of the more interesting acquisitions of the Abbott buying Knoll Pharmaceuticals for Synthroid, and they had this little thing thrown in, which is Humira, which became the biggest product ever. So, that's one of the more interesting things you'll see in your lifetime. Next slide. And this just is the growth on retail, mail, and long-term care. And so in retail, it's the HIV, immunology, lipid regulators. And in mail, it's immunology, oncology, multiple sclerosis. And in non-retail, it's oncology, immunology, and some of these blood, followed by multiple sclerosis. So when you market a product, it all depends on the characteristics of the product, what channel of distribution it's going to go to. Next slide. This is just the top 20. This is the first the top 10, and you can see what the growth is of that. And the immunology growth has slowed. Oncology has picked up. Other central nervous system picked up. Other cardiovasculars picked up. Not too much in the multiple sclerosis space. Next slide. And here's some of the other ones. Lipid regulators. Spending is picked up, and that's probably because of the PCSK9s that are making slow movement. So, growing at 13.3%. So this is where a lot of the growth is. Now let's move to the next slide. Generics and biosimilars. Now, Peter mentioned that the generic biosimilars were very much down from where they were last year. I just noted Mallinckrodt and Endo merger just was completed, and the first thing they did was divest themselves of their generic and API. I think that's called PAR now, return of a name in the past. So let's just talk a little bit about the generic industry. And believe it or not, there's 2 brand products that Mounjaro and Ozempic that are bigger than the whole generic industry. That's $71 billion between 2 that is bigger than 1,497 other molecules that are generic at 56.48. It used to be 3, then it was 7. And so, it could be that the way that Mounjaro and Zepbound are growing, it could be 1. So it just shows you that the disparity in the generic business. Now, the next slide will take us through is that generics account for about 89% of all the adjusted prescriptions dispensed. And every year they represent less share of the dollar sales. So that's 88.3% of the adjusted prescriptions, representing 6.4% of the dollars. So that number was 10.3 in 2020. It continues to go down. And that's because of a variety of different reasons, price deflation being one of them. Next slide. So in the generic market, and this is how the generic market would compare against the brand market, is that both the generic market and brand market are dominated by volume. There's no room for price in the generic market as price deflation continues. There's somewhat more room on the brand side. So generics, do suffer from this kind of, I've called it the race to the bottom for the last 10 years, and it's getting close to the bottom. Next slide. And when you look across the top therapy areas, 90% of prescriptions are generics, and immunology, obesity, and diabetes have more brand prescriptions. Now, immunology and oncology will have biosimilars. Obesity and diabetes, they will be more generics, and that'll happen. It's happening now, but to a greater extent at the beginning of the next decade. Next slide. So the top slide shows you the ANDAs is abbreviated new drug application. And just to show you how things have changed, is that it used to be that 2/3 of the products ANDAs got approved, got launched, and the numbers in 2024 and in 2025, not much better, is less than 25%. So most products, the generic products get approved, never get launched because it's the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th, and 90% of what the Office of Generic Drugs approve, they've already approved something. As I said, 89% of the RXs are for generic products and only 6% of the sales. And we mentioned about two products being bigger than the whole generic business. Next slide. What I didn't show you in this deck was the price deflation. It's getting better, but it's still deflating at about 5%. In 2022, it was 11%. So the thing about all the biosimilars we saw before Humira and Stelara were in the medical benefit side, not the pharmacy benefit side. So the medical benefit side would have the GPOs, and the pharmaceutical benefit side would have the PBMs. And what was interesting about Humira is that the first one launched in 2023, which was from Amgen, a high cost, high rebate product, low cost, low rebate product. What happened? Nothing. Middle of the year, 6 others launched. Some were actually bioequivalent. What happened? Nothing. And it really wasn't until a biosimilar Humira was developed between CVS Caremark and Sandoz. And that seems to be the way that the immunology market is going to grow, is through the private label biosimilars, not the like the competition in the hospital side. Next slide shows us the same thing with Stelara, and the same thing happened there. And this was the Amgen deal with United Healthcare. So that's the way that's going to go. Next slide. So Stellar's market share has eroded. The next slide shows you that the other products, the ones on the medical benefit side, continue to decline. You can see that there some of these products are a fraction of what they used to be. Not that there's biosimilars, which is good, that it saves money for healthcare to put toward innovation. Next slide. And we can skip this one. One thing I've noticed in my observation for the pharmaceutical market, there's a lot of herd mentality going on in pharmaceuticals. That's why you have 12 PD-1s or PD-L1s. It's easier to do something that somebody's already done than something to develop something on the new side. And there's been this herd mentality in biosimilars because everybody went for oncology, immunology, and eye, and those are big drugs. And this slide just shows you there's only one biosimilar in the pipeline for a product that less than $1 billion pre-expiry sales. So I would think that it would be easier to get a piece of the action on being the only player with a $1 billion drug, being the $12 billion player in a $12 billion drug. So there's this herd mentality, and I suggest that we need to expand our horizons on that. Next slide. And it's only going to get more complicated. When I did an oncology presentation a couple weeks back in New York, we're talking about antibody drug coagulates, bispecific antibodies, cell therapies, gene therapies. Life was much more simple when there's only brands, generics, and vaccines. Now there's at least 9 different types of things. You have biologics, specialty, generics, rare and orphan disease, cell and gene therapies, and so forth. Next slide. GLP-1s. Okay, let's go to this next slide. So as I mentioned, GLP-1s are 36% to the year-over-year growth in the marketplace. And that is, you know, 1/3 of all the growth that's come from GLP-1s. The next slide shows you that GLP-1s are primarily coming from retail. 85% of sales are retail. We've seen some signs that males actually doesn't want to ship GLP-1s. They would rather have retail dispense them. And generally, a retailer will lose money on every GLP-1 prescription they dispense, every one that they dispense, which is illogical in my mind. So, you see that the weight loss category is growing 121%, the diabetes category 37.1%. Next slide. You know, what I think is interesting is look at the difference between women and men on the excuse me, on the diabetes GLP-1s, where there's a 29% difference between women and men. But in weight loss, there's a 180% difference, as more women would get into the GLP-1s for weight loss than men, and it's more similar on the side of the diabetes prescriptions. Next slide. This just mentioned is that the $35 generic $35 insulin prescriptions, taking about $12 billion out of that category. And what was interesting, and it probably shows you that the GLP-1s are affecting type 1 diabetes as well, is that as the value went down, the volume did not go up on the GLP-1 or on the insulins. Next slide. And this is just, it shows you they've been switching out of the non-insulin diabetes products for the last 2 years, primarily the GLP-1. So the GLP-1s are the thing. And the next slide, I think, shows you that, well, actually, 44% of independent stores do not fill weight loss GLP-1 prescriptions. Just think about that. Is you go into a pharmacy thinking that they will fill your prescription, but almost half the independents are not filling weight loss GLP-1 prescriptions because they lose money. So, you know, something's kind of got to give on this, and maybe some of the changes that we're going to see on the direct-to-consumer will change this around. But a pharmacy should not lose money on dispensing any prescription, in my mind. Next slide just shows you, if you think you've seen a little bit on GLP-1s, there's 181 obesity medicines in development or marketed with multiple mechanisms beyond the leading GLP-1 therapies. And so you see where they are relatively in the different phases. You see there are a variety of different mechanisms of actions in the middle and different forms, and a lot of them will be pill forms. So you've seen a little of this, and there's a lot more to come on this. And you have 60% of the United States population being either obese or overweight. I think something like 30% of the US population is obese. There certainly is the demand for it here and around the rest of the world. Next slide. Just a couple things on retail performance. 7,400 fewer pharmacies since 2018. Now, some of this had to do with, you know, this is happening prior to COVID. And, you know, COVID, you didn't see as many go off, but you're seeing, you know, more than, you know, 1,400 stores going out of business each year, and 1,611 went out of business this year. And so that it puts more stress on the existing retail pharmacies, and I'll show you in a minute how their workload has gone up. Let's move to the next slide. So I said mass merchandise food stores are growing the most, and you know, chains probably because of the Rite Aid going out of business, selling their pharmacy files at stores to various different things, including food and mass merchandisers. That has the weakest share. Next slide. I think it's important to know is method of payment is Med D leads the way. Third party is next, and Medicaid continues to go down. If you recall that Medicaid expanded greatly during COVID, And now they're unraveling that, and the Medicaid population is down. I think that's on the next slide we have. The Medicaid enrollment is consistently dropping. And it has not reached well, it's kind of reached its stabilization point. And a lot of the reason why the Medicaid enrollments is dropped is because people didn't fill out the forms to continue on the Medicaid. Next slide. So this is a good synopsis. I mentioned that what does that 7,400 fewer pharmacies mean? That means that in a chain drugstore, there's 21% increase in workload. Food stores is 9, mass merchandise is 12, retail it's 11, and independents it's only 3.1. And one way they can do is more 90-day scripts, which they all continue to do. And of course, a lot of independent is the cash business. Next slide, and next section, product launches, and so this is as of August, 63 new launches through August of 2025. That number did increase a little bit in September, but don't forget that the government has been in lockdown for the last 40 some odd days, so there's not been a lot of new launches. And in the 2025 launches, a good percentage of biosimilars represented 26%. In terms of therapy areas, oncology led the way this year, followed by immunology and osteoporosis. Last year was oncology, neurology, and cardiovascular. Year before that was oncology, immunology, and neurology. And 2023, the best launch was Zepbound. 2022, it was Monjuro. And interesting enough, in 2024, was the private label version of Humira was #1, followed by a Eylea biosimilar. Then he had an atopic dermatitis product. In 2025, it's cystic fibrosis, Stelara biosimilar, and pain. So that's the kind of landscape, but generally we have not seen the blockbusters like we saw in 2023, 2020, 2022, and 2023. Next slide. Next slide is launch trajectory. It was pretty consistent, but now we've had this slowdown, and we just don't know when they will dig themselves out from that slowdown, and it may not happen till the beginning of next year. So here we are in mid-November. Next slide. And there's I think it was covered a little bit before. One of the first sessions is overall launch performance holds steady over the last 3 years, setting a depressed post-pandemic new normal. So what was interesting is that the thing in the last 10 years, the exceptions to this launch performance have been the hepatitis C products, the GLP-1s, and the COVID products, and some of the vaccines. Particularly the Arexvy and some of those vaccines really did make a niche, but the other ones really have not taken off that much, other than those. Next slide. As I mentioned, it's the biosimilars that are kind of leading the way in 2024. Next slide. Looking ahead, as Peter did, in the last 6 years, 159 first-in-class molecules emerged from the research and reached the U.S. marketplace. You see a lot of those are in oncology, a lot of those in neurology, hematology. But the good news is, and you look at some of this stuff, is that there's a lot of activity in Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's, and so forth, which are truly needed. So there's some real potential for some of those markets going forward. Next slide. What were the launches? 60% were first in class, 50% were biologic. And you see that, and a lot of them were specialty, and a good number were orphan and orphan oncology drugs. Next slide. And then you have indication expansion. So of those 509 new active substance approvals, there was almost double the amount, or more than double the amount of indication expansions, over two per drug. Now, one of the concerns about the Inflation Reduction Act, and a lot in the oncology space, is the Innovation Reduction Act, is there appears there's going to be a tendency is that you're going to hold your launches until you get your biggest indication. Because if you launch a couple smaller indications and get the big one, you get penalized. So you might hold all three till the big one launches and you launch the other two. So that is a major concern that people have in oncology. Next slide. Drug shortages, and then we're coming down the home stretch, and we should finish on time. Drug shortages is that the numbers are beginning to slow, but 77% of these drug shortages are ongoing more than 2 years. And the big one was 2023 and 2022. I still, frankly, surprised how we did not have a lot more drug shortages during COVID. You know, when China was shut down for 6 months and you couldn't fly the products anywhere. India was somewhat shut down, but yet we didn't run out. But we've had some major ones since then. You know, probably the biggest one was generic cisplatin and generic carboplatin. And I have a concern about the shortage, particularly on the office of the generic drugs, because some of these are on razor thin margins. Next slide. So you might be interested, where do the API come from? And so this is what some of these tariffs are starting to represent. So when you look at the middle column, which is brands, is that 43% of the brand API comes from the European Union. And a lot of that comes from Ireland. And only 15% comes from the United States. On the generic side, is 36% comes from India, 18% comes from the EU, and 8% comes from China. So you have a majority is coming from other places on that. So hence my concern about the generic side more than the brand side. Next slide. And this is the inspections, the FDA inspections of drug inspections. And, you know, year to date 2025 really does not reflect what's happened over the last 42 days. But you could see there was a dramatic change when COVID hit in terms of domestic inspections and foreign inspections. And the domestic inspections are not back. The Indian inspections are not back. The China inspections are coming back a little bit, but nowhere. If China is going to be an innovation hub, there's going to be a lot more inspections. And this is one, you can't inspect a plant from your house. You physically have to get there to inspect them. And that's just not happening. And of course, probably not a lot happened at all over the last couple months. Next slide. Here's some things on the radar. First, next slide. Lilly Direct. You know, you have Lilly Direct, you have NovoCare, you now have the Trump, and then what Trump is trying to do is this is going to change things around, particularly for uninsured and self-paid patients by offering direct-to-consumer pricing. And this is a consumer-driven category, so you know it may not have as many applications for other categories, but it certainly does for this one. Next slide. You have the Inflation Reduction Act and the maximum fair price products, and the, you know, I scratch my head. Here's just 5 of the 10, and you know, of 5 out of 10 that they picked for the first round, you'd already had generics or biosimilars on the way, which didn't seem to me be the smartest 10 to pick, but they were picked anyways. But you can see that you know, Januvia with the generics is starting to slow down, but the other ones have picked up. Next slide. And these are the Stelara is another one. You see Imbruvica, and another, and so, you know, so you've got kind of a mixed bag. As some have steady growth, some have lost to generics and to biosimilars. Next slide. And then The topic of discussion is the 340B program, which was well intended at first to help indigent patients. And if you look at the growth of from $54 billion to $148 billion, is that we must have one heck of a lot of indigent patients in the United States. But actually, it's a survival mechanism for hospitals that help them keep themselves in business. So this is something that's been perverted, and we spend more money on 340B than we do on Medicaid and Medicare Part B, and only regular Medicare do we spend more money on. So there's a project on now to with HRSA to try to reduce these duplicate discounts, which are very pervasive in this marketplace. Next slide. All right, here we come down, outlook. So we expect US medicine spending to grow 3 to 6% through 2029, lifted by novel drugs and offset by patent expiries and price cuts. So this last 5-year CAGR was 8.8, and we expect it to be 5 to 8, so less than the previous CAGR. Net invoice below WAC, 57% versus 52, and net CAGR is 3 to 6 versus 7.3. And a lot of that happens, toward the end of 28, 29 with the biosimilars for some of the bigger oncology drugs. Next slide. This is oncology spending, and you can see that we expect it will grow to $165 billion by 2029, but you see that the growth rate really is going to slow. So there'll be 100 new oncology drugs, but some big losses to biosimilars on some of the bigger drugs in the oncology space. Next slide is immunology. Immunology has been slowing because of the Humira and Stelara biosimilars. Is that we think that the cost per medicine per day is going to decline a bit. Volume growth will continue, and net spending growth will continue to as well. Next slide. This is diabetes. We think that net spending on diabetes will be flat through 2029 as list price costs will be offset by the wider adoption of new therapies. A lot of rebates in this category, and you have continued uptake of novel therapies that offset some of these price cuts. And let's go to the next slide. And this is the obesity. And I would say that our forecast on this is obsolete, considering some of the discussions within the last week of expanding access, and the access could double from what it is today. And of course, the long-term question is that, and you start to see that these GLP-1s have application for maybe Alzheimer's, fatty liver disease, and other things as the indications continue to expand. And what does that mean is 5 years from now, when people are healthier, do they need their cardiovascular drugs? Do they need some of their cholesterol drugs? Only time will tell, but that'll be something to keep an eye on. Next slide. There's a lot of exclusivity losses. You see the blue ones are biologics, so more in biologics toward the end of, well, this is currently this chart. And I'll resend it to Peter. Is it going over the next 5 years? It's more in the biologics than in the small molecules. And then the next slide shows you what's going to drive growth. It's up in the upper right-hand sort, you see it's obesity. If anything, is that number should get higher and move farther to the right. See oncology, pain, immunology, diabetes are kind of all there together. The diabetes category is trending better recently because of the GLP-1s. See not a lot of happening on central nervous systems, HIV, infectious disease. So, oncology and immunology, oncology and obesity will drive, but immunology will hang in there, and COVID will be kind of in and out. Next slide. So we've looked at a lot of things, believe it or not, probably something like 70 slides worth. So we looked at a market that's growing, and all parts of the market are growing kind of double digits. We talked about GLP-1s being the biggest contributor to growth observed in the marketplace. We talked about in retail, mail and mass, or mass and food are drivers. Continue to lose stores or share. Stores have closed, and independents not filling GLP-1s. The GLP-1s is a subject for itself. We talked about generic deflation, 5% year to year, and the herd mentality, only one biosimilar in the pipeline for less than $1 billion. And we didn't talk a lot about cough, cold, and flu. Even though I got the flu, there was not a, and we look at all the stats, it was not a big flu season in Australia. I did get the flu shot and managed to get the flu here. So I'm sorry that I can't be there in person, but happy to answer any questions you might have.